For more on this story, we can bring in Robert Gucci, senior lecturer at the University of Lancaster. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us on the program. Did Donald Trump do enough to reach across the aisle, in your opinion?
Well, he sure is tapping into the military base in the United States. And first of all, I don't think the average American knew that we had troops in Syria to begin with. They're responding positively to troops coming back from Afghanistan and moving throughout Iraq. But then at the same time, he's appealing to military voters by sending troops to Mexico and threatening to send troops into Venezuela. So quite frankly, he's sending a lot of mixed messages to some Americans, but really tapping into his base and those who believe that America should have some sort of global power, military might, but also one that puts America's interests first.
But he said he didn't want to fight endless wars, and you know, he did, when talking about Venezuela, for instance, he didn't really say anything in the speech about sending troops to Venezuela.
Well, that's right, but that's coming out of a week of where that was a proposition on the table, and certainly continues to be part of his rhetoric. Certainly, the sending troops to Mexico is something that he's been talking about. So even though he's not touching upon it in his speech specifically, he is laying the groundwork and using the State of the Union address, as most presidents do, to really solidify the dominant positions around which his other ideas can circle. Now,
speaking about troop withdrawal, he did talk about Afghanistan for a couple of sentences in that speech. And what was interesting to me is he said, you know, let's give peace a chance in Afghanistan. And he spoke about his administration's efforts to you know, how they're succeeding in creating, in negotiating with the Taliban and other actors in the country.
Well, and certainly he talks about negotiation with North Korea as well. So he is tapping into a lot of the peace rhetoric that I think a lot of voters who are on the fence could move into. But at the same time, he's ignoring a lot of the issues related to bump stocks and other uses of guns on the streets of America itself. And we heard that from the Democratic response, that there are lots of concerns about the livelihood of Americans that are dying from gun violence. So he is walking a line between you know, use of authority through military, but also the use of diplomacy. So there are some mixed messages here, but really he's rallying to those people who are on the fence, so he can reposition for the next 2 years what his presidency is going to mean, at least going into the 2020 election.
But you said he was appealing to his base. Now, don't his base really care? I mean, yes, of course, they don't want Americans fighting endless wars, but they also want to see changes happen at home. And he did spend a lot of that time talking about illegal immigration.
You know, that's right. But American voters really do rely on their sense of identity based upon the military. So the use of U.S. force is directly related to rhetoric about religion, rhetoric about nation, rhetoric about American democracy. And so it's a rhetorical process that presidents use, whether to use force or not use force, particularly in conversations at the State of the Union, where pollsters are sitting across the world measuring people's responses to this. So the State of the Union isn't just about putting out positions, but it is testing it with the American public, doing metrics, running algorithms to see what types of responses will be most popular as the presidency continues.
Okay, so you're saying that Donald Trump can't risk alienating his base, you know, when we have an election at the end of next year. So he didn't reach across the aisle, essentially, because he did say he wants to eradicate HIV, the HIV epidemic in the next 10 years. He did say he wants to lower the cost of healthcare, things Democrats can get around, nothing meaty, if you will.
Well, I think that's right. You know, he did then bring up issues of abortion. He did bring up issues of women in the economy, but yet we know what his record is related to discourse about women, that it isn't necessarily a positive discourse or a respectful discourse, and we saw that also during the Supreme Court battle with Supreme Court Justice Kavanaugh. And so he's trying to reach across in the ways that he thinks are important, but his base and people on the fence are also going to want to see a presidential candidate who can stand, in this case, his ground, give a little bit when he needs to, but really to come back and say, you know, the one thing that's most important is immigration, and if you don't get behind me, we're going to have a very dangerous country. And so it's all of these different stories are revolving around that one issue, so that he's tapping into his base, he's talking to people who are on the fence, but he's also positioning himself on those one or two major issues.
Robert Gutscher, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us on the program today.
Sure.